I was involved on a steering committee of a large group back in the early 90s where we started doing large educational seminars. We got busted up by the FBI all the time because we're spreading too much truth. This was pre-internet and they didn't want this information out. So we had to go offshore, but we were putting on seminars with 4,000 or 5,000 people, week-long events, and we'd have people like G. Edward Griffin and everybody coming in. Okay, so that's the mechanics. We learn how things work. Now, on a spiritual level, money was never necessary in the first place. If you consider that in past, there's 2 golden ages, to be specific, in which people did not have money. They were in full capacity of their creative abilities to precipitate their needs without the need for a middleman. So just like the Vatican creating priest, where now you need a middleman between you and God, the same thing. Now we have a middleman between our own creative abilities and capacities called money, and it's called a transmitting utility. And if you go into the Uniform Commercial Code, that now has usurped the entire constitutional premise for law in Article 3 courts. And now it's all about commerce. And in the commercial code, it talks about transmitting utilities, creditors, debtors, and everything else. Now, if you know all of that, you can become a creditor and not be a debtor, or i.e. a slave. And at the same time, you can be free of this money beast once and for all. But that's another whole technology, a different way of discharging what people think of as debts and everything. But the real downside, if we want to get into the spiritual aspects, is that now we were taking our mind off of source. And just like we're explaining before, we're in a one-way linear entropic fashion. The only way we can survive is through money, rather than understanding we're the source of everything in the first place. So the real evil, if you want to call it that, is it has made us ignorant of who we are, where we come from, and our unlimited capacity. And that was the goal in the first place. And it's not a conspiracy. These were all intended outcomes by whoever you want to call them, that wanted to enslave the entirety of mankind in the first place. So first you have to understand how things work, just like in medicine. And then you have to understand how it's one energetic matter continuum, and then learn how to work the whole continuum. Now, in my own personal experience, having gone through everything everybody goes through with just all your concerns about money and raising a family and getting, a job and, making, in my case, making a clinic work, keeping the wheels on the wagon. Along the way, the more I learned and the more I understood on both levels, materialistic and spiritual, a funny thing happened, whereas the less I concerned myself about money, the greater the manifestations and the more positive the outcomes that started happening.
That's big. What do you attest to that? The less you focus, the more it flowed.
Well, with experience, we realized, no, money is not my source. And if I keep my focus on the real source, whatever that means to you, you can call it God, you can call it the spirit that moves through all things, you can call it your I am presence. It doesn't matter. We're all talking about the same thing. The more, if I like to do an accounting at the end of every day, and what it is you have 2 sides of the ledger. And if your thoughts are on problems, symptoms, lack, more than just unlimited capacity, that's going to be your experience. Now, the more you go through with life and just experiment in different practices, martial arts was a big thing in my life too, because I learned how to direct energy through that and actually perform better physically, something that I wish I would have known back in my old football days. But then you start understanding that, it's really, manifestation isn't really about just getting a job or going to the gym. In fact, when I was in ball, my last few years, and I was very precise about my training at different times, and I'd always get it down on paper, I noticed a peculiar thing. When I got my program down after I was more experienced, my body would just start transforming before I even got to go out on the track and do 440 repeats or anything. So it's like, oh, wow, just the intention alone, my physicality is actually transforming. I noticed the same thing with my finances. It's too long of a story to tell here, but I was involved in international finance for a period because I had a lot of very interesting clients who, some of them were even from these elite families and so forth. And one of them put me on the board of an international chain of banks in order to oversee humanitarian funding. There's prime ministers involved, all sorts of things. And in the process, we started doing some good things because we had billions available to do these things. But that posed a threat against the vested interest of other folks. So they kind of came after us. So I got to experience being very wealthy and then all of a sudden having everything taken, as we were targeted by the powers that be. But rather than getting shook up about it, my wife and myself just at that point had a lot of experience with our inner practices and manifested within a short year back to where we thought we had lost a bunch. That was a very, powerful experience because we knew our way out of a jam. Our kids are in college. We, a big loss relative to many years of work of accumulation and everything. But because we knew where things come from in the first place, that's where we put our mindset and then just reinvented ourselves on the instant. Now we're out, we own a farm, we have a business, and we really don't concern so much about the money. We have bank accounts, we have to do all that. But our experience is every single day getting together and setting our intentions, and those intentions just manifest almost like magic everything we need, whether we need more help on the farm, whether we need, money to manifest a building. And so that's where we come from. It's not even looking at the bank account anymore. And that's what we're all capable of. And that's the biggest secret. But that's why they created money, is to keep our eye off the ball so that we would come into our true power and figure out we don't need their species of money, their banks, or anything in the first place. And there would be a very elegant way to balance out energy on our own without CPAs and bookkeepers, counting beans. We could do that very much if we lived in an enlightened society where everybody was in honor with each other, and we would simply produce, and that energy output would automatically come back to us, and nobody would need to keep score. So that's where we're headed. We're still a little ways away from that, but that's more the spiritual side. And then when it comes to bodies, when you realize that you are not dependent on anything external, that's when you regain your health. And money is one of the biggest obstacles that people have to overcome as far as taking the tension out of their neurology in order to heal their bodies.
So good. Everyone rewind that and play it again, because
that was lot right there.
No, really. I mean, that was beautiful. The way you explained that, what I was visualizing as you were talking, Bear, was just an IV hooked up to every single human being that has ever felt that existential pressure. And inside of that IV is a manufactured concern about, will I have enough? Will there be enough? Will there ever be enough money? Will my kids be able to eat well? Can we have the house we want? Like all these, it takes my breath away, actually, which is actually a key indicator. Whenever I'm not breathing, this is why breath work has been such a big part of my life. It's in the absence of breathing, in the absence of breath, when I'm robbing my body of oxygen, that I'm more monetizable, that I'm more open to being under the control of illusionary fear. And everything that you just said, I was visualizing, because whenever someone's speaking, I'm always seeing pictures in my mind. And every human being at some time in their life, and maybe even right now, you're feeling this, you feel like there's an IV of stress when it comes to the subject of money. And I think you did a really good job of stoking the curiosity inside of someone listening and watching, that actually is completely false. We do not have to believe that this IV stuck in our arm is real. We can actually just take it out. We can remove the catheter and we can go in a different direction. If you like that clip, click the one that's on the screen now, and I promise you, you'll enjoy it just the same, if not more.